Take a look at these videos. I will be right back.
So the BRICS nations have just announced mass sanctions against the US and Israel. At least according to this YouTube expert tech show who doesn't know what he's talking about. After using several search engines, the only article I could find is that BRICS countries discuss Gaza conflict, but don't agree on a joint declaration. If the BRICS nations did something to disrupt trade with the rest of the world, you would see a bunch of economic indicators go crazy. The US dollar would not be at 102 in its index right now. It would either skyrocket to well over 110 as a flight to safety, or it would crash well below 80 if people were abandoning it. The price of oil would easily be over $120 a barrel, and our treasuries, like our 10-year and our 2-year bonds, would not be at 4.1 and 4.6%. It would most likely go well within 10% or 11%. The Fed funds rate would not be at 5.33%. But what would happen if the BRICS nations attempted to sanction the United States? Let's look at our imports by country. Who are our top 3 importers? Mexico, Canada, and China. China's economy is going through a recession, which is why oil prices keep crashing, because their manufacturers aren't needing the oil. China needs our market. We are keeping them afloat. But what if the BRICS nations stop taking our exports? Well, look at that. Canada gets 18% of our exports, Mexico gets 16%, and China gets only 7.5%. Let's look at all of these other nations that import our goods. Are these BRICS nations? Won't Mexico join BRICS? Their president said in May that the US dollar is the globe's principal currency, and he backs it. And keep in mind, the United States is already taking their factories out of China and putting them in Mexico. What about sanctioning the US dollar? Saudi Arabia said last year that they're considering accepting yuan instead of dollars. A year and a half has passed, and China is buying more oil now from Russia than the Saudis. I wonder what happened. But OPEC nations are selling their liquid natural gas to the Chinese in yuan. Yeah, because there's no contract between OPEC and the US as to how they sell their natural gas. Duh. But the BRICS nations have so many more people, 3.2 billion. That's 4 times the G7 population. The total GDP for the G7 is $46 trillion, while the BRICS is $31 trillion. And that's including all the new countries that just joined. Maybe the BRICS nations would be more of a threat if China did not have to constantly deal with food scarcity. And by the end of 2023, the BRICS nations were buying up US treasuries again. At the beginning of 2023, the world had about $7.2 trillion of US debt. By the end of the year, they increased that number to $8 trillion. So the BRICS nations, along with a lot of the world, just increased their US debt holdings by $800 billion. And maybe the BRICS nations would be more of a threat if they weren't too busy stealing each other. This is the most telling chart of the relationship between China and it is the exchange between the ruble and the yuan. Right before invaded you in 2022, the Chinese skyrocketed their currency against the ruble, and the ruble dropped like a stone. And then China started buying a lot of Russian goods on the cheap. The ruble recovered very quickly for a short period of time and was actually above average. And now the ruble is trading much lower against the yuan, and the yuan is struggling against the dollar. India just uncovered a racket duping Indian citizens into fighting in yuan, and India just moved 10,000 more troops to their border with China because the Chinese keep making incursions. So I'll agree with Tech Show. This is bad for BRICS. I'm the Geo Husar, and if you want to have a good laugh as to the threat that the BRICS nations pose, please look at my playlist on them.
BRICS condemns Israel's war on Gaza in signal to the West. The group, which has previously focused on economic issues, called for an end to war crimes in the Gaza conflict. Earlier this year, the BRICS had agreed to expand and add Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, although to be honest there is some ambiguity about Saudi Arabia's membership, the UAE, and Iran. So what you're saying is, shortly after Iran joined BRICS, BRICS then condemns Israel's war in Gaza. Yeah, that makes sense, considering Iran is the mastermind behind Hamas. Come on now.
Now, just like we've heard from the videos waved through the international community, the BRICS nations Brazil, Argentina, India, China, and South Africa have collectively announced economic sanctions on Israel and the United States, signaling a dramatic shift in global diplomatic dynamics. Now, the decision to impose sanctions in support of Gaza, Palestine, reflects a bold stance by BRICS on an influential group of emerging economies and carries significant implications for geopolitics politics, the Middle East peace process, and the principles that govern international relations. Now, the long-standing conflict between Israel and Palestine, with its roots deeply embedded in historical, religious, and territorial disputes, has been a persistent source of tension in the Middle East. The situation in Gaza in particular has been marked by recurring bouts of violence, humanitarian crisis, and complex geopolitical considerations. Now, the international community has grappled with finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict, and Brics' decision to impose economic sanctions marks a critical development in the ongoing quest for a just and lasting solution. The decision to sanction both Israel and the United States is noteworthy as it underscores Brics' collective commitment to addressing the broader geopolitical context surrounding the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, while Israel has been a focus of international scrutiny for its actions in the occupied territories, the inclusion of the United States in the sanctions indicates a clear rebuke of Washington's policies and actions in the region, particularly its unwavering support for Israel. Now, the economic sanctions announced by Brics are expected to have far-reaching consequences. Trade, investment, and financial transactions between Brics nations and Israel and the United States are likely to face restrictions, potentially impacting the economic well-being of these nations. The move reflects a willingness by Brics to leverage its economic influence as a tool for promoting diplomatic change, challenging the conventional notion that economic sanctions are primarily the domain of Western powers. Now, the Brics nations, often characterized by diverse geopolitical interests and priorities, have found common ground in their support for the Palestinian cause. This unity speaks to the evolving dynamics of global diplomacy, where traditional alignments and alliances are subject to shifts based on shared values, regional concerns, and a desire to shape a more equitable world order. Now, China, as one of the Brics members, has increasingly asserted its role as a global economic powerhouse and diplomatic actor. The country's economic influence, paired with its long-standing commitment to a multipolar world, positions it as a key player in the Brics' decision to impose sanctions. China's growing role in global affairs is reflected not only in its economic clout, but also in its willingness to take a stand on issues of international significance. Similarly, Russia's involvement in the decision to impose sanctions underscores its desire to play a more prominent role in shaping global narratives. The Kremlin's geopolitical maneuvering, especially in the Middle East, has become increasingly assertive. The decision to support Gaza through economic sanctions is not only a reflection of Russia's stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but also a strategic move to enhance its influence on the international stage. Now, India, with its historical ties to Palestine and its aspirations for greater global influence, has also aligned itself with the Brics decision while navigating complex relationships in the region. India's support for the economic sanctions sends a signal of solidarity with the Palestinian cause. It reflects a nuanced approach by India to balance its strategic partnerships with various nations while upholding principles of justice and international law. Now, South Africa's participation in the decision to impose sanctions carries a unique historical context. The nation, having overcome apartheid and transitioned into a democratic society, understand the significance of international solidarity in addressing issues of injustice and human rights violations. South Africa's involvement in the Brics decision aligns with its commitment to global justice and equality. Brazil, with its growing economic influence and aspirations for a more prominent role in global affairs, adds another layer to the collective decision. Brazil's involvement underscores the idea that emerging powers, when united, can exert significant influence on the world stage, challenging the traditional dominance of Western powers in shaping global narratives. Now, the impact of Brics' decision to impose economic sanctions on Israel and the United States goes beyond the immediate economic repercussions. It sends a powerful message to the international community about the shifting dynamics of global power and the emergence of alternative voices in diplomatic discourse. We have finally come to the end of the video. Share your thoughts on what you think. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.